everyone, good morning. Today I want to talk to you about how mobile apps can have design systems too. But I first want to introduce myself. My name is Jolanda Verhoef, and I'm the youngest of 3 children. These are my brother and my sister next to me. And when I was a little child, I always wanted to play with the toys and the games that my brother and sister had, even though they seriously weren't meant for me yet. So you can see me trying to draw with them, but also trying to use a computer, even though I was just 3 years old, or trying to make a puzzle. And that tendency, I specifically remember one time I was 6 years old, and my dad brought home this Rubik's Cube. And I had nightmares for over a week trying to solve a Rubik's Cube. And at some point, of course, my mom and dad found out that it was the Rubik's Cube that gave me the nightmares, so they took it away from me. And if we fast forward to now, I still have the same tendency to want to do and want to have everything that maybe isn't really meant for me yet. So this time, it's mostly related to computers. Whenever there's a developer that uses some awesome new tool, I really want to use it as well. So that basically led me to stand here today talking to you, but we'll get to that later. So 6 months ago, I worked at this company. I moved to this company called Coolblue. It's a Dutch e-commerce company, and they sell all kinds of things. They have a website, have had it for quite some time, and they sell, for example, laptops, but all the way to barbecues and everything in between. And that website has existed for quite some time, almost 20 years by now. But 6 months ago, they decided they also want to move into creating native apps. So I was hired to start with the Android app. And we were able to create a team around that. And we were able to start a greenfield project. There was no existing code. There was no existing designs, except for the ones for the website. So that gave us a lot of opportunity to really think things through. And we decided that we would do a little analysis of the problems we had before, problems we had at our previous companies and problems we had designing other apps before. And one of the things that I really noticed at my previous company, but also before, is that there was always a lot of interaction between me as a developer and a designer. We would have to go back and forth. And yesterday, when Sarah told us about how some developers mentioned that they didn't want to ask questions to the designer 10 times a day, that really resonated with me. I really felt the same. So at that point, I thought, if this costs me so much time, maybe there are ways to improve this process. Maybe there are ways that we can make sure that we don't have to talk 10 times a day in order to implement a design. So I moved to the designers and the developers that already worked at Coolblue for some time, and I asked them for help. And that was the first time I heard of the term design system. And I didn't know the term, so I asked them to explain to me what they meant with it. And the way they described it to me was that a design system is one place, normally a website, that has detailed documentation of all the designs that are used for the application. And they are kept in sync, so they're synchronized with the actual implementation of those designs. And for me, that sounded quite useful, to have the designs and also the documentation surrounding those designs, and make sure that those don't get out of date. I was used to having the version 1.1-final whatever. And this would help to have a constantly in sync version of our designs. So basically, I really wanted to have this thing also for Android and also for iOS. I was thinking, if web has it, why can't we have it? So I asked them, hey, can you tell me something about how this would work for our native developers? And they weren't really able to give an answer to that, which makes sense because they are web developers, they are designers, so they might not know. So those were kind of my famous last words. And I did a little research. I went online. I looked at a lot of open source design systems. So a lot of big companies show their design system publicly so that we can learn from it. And I saw a lot of terms that would help us to make a very nice design system that would be in sync with the implementation. But all of those terms related to web development. I saw HTML, CSS, a lot about React components. And for me as a native developer, that doesn't really help. So being a little bit disappointed, I thought I'll ask the experts. So I went to Slack. There's a Slack environment called Design Systems, and they have a channel called Mobile. So I thought, what better way to ask? And in that channel, I asked, you know what? Can someone help me answer the question how I would go about this for native apps? And the first response I got was someone who gave me a link to a React Native library, which, as most developers probably know, is a little bit different from native development. So I do not write my code in React Native, so this didn't really help. And then I got one more answer, and that was, well, I think most people just work on web. And that was it. So that didn't really quite help, and actually it made me quite sad. Like the 6-year-old child in me really wanted to have this awesome thing, but I couldn't have it. So that's why I'm here today, and I really want to appeal to you today to help me get this thing going, to help me make sure that mobile design systems become a thing. But in order to convince you that you really want to start that battle together with me, I think it might make sense to explain a little bit what exactly a design system is and why it's so hard to use it for native apps. So a design system at its core consists of 4 parts, let's say. Design tokens, components, vision, and management. At first, if we take a look at the design tokens, we can say that design tokens are the core properties that every website and app consists out of. So if we strip down a website or an app to its bare minimum, this is what is left. And one of the design tokens is the colors. So if we strip down an application, we do still have different colors. And those normally represent the brand of the company that makes the design system. Then we also have the typography. So what different types of text do we allow? How is that text styled? So for example, we can have a title text that is a bit bigger and uses a different font than the body text. And there's normally a limited set of possibilities here. Next up are different spacings. So how do we orient things in respect to each other? How do we position things? And last, there are the icons. So which different core visualizations do we use? And those can be used in multiple places as well. So those are some examples of the bare tokens, the bare elements of our design, and we start with those. And by using just a limited set of those, we're able to reuse those here and there and make sure we create a nice design. So next up, the components. What are components? Well, it's pretty close to the tokens, actually, but these are the core elements that the website and the app are built out of. And it's best displayed by just showing you some examples. So we can have, for example, a button, which in the end consists of spacings, typography, and colors again. But as you can see, it's like a set of those that represent an element that can be reused throughout the application. Same goes for a text input, same goes for a toggle, etc. And normally a design system has around 50 to 100 of these components, and it describes how those can be used. Next up is the vision, and the vision is like a high-level guide, a high-level principle that guides you how you can create a good design. So given these basic design tokens, given these components, how can we combine those to create a very nice, usable design for our user? And last but not least is the management of the design system. There have to be some rules surrounding the development and the maintenance of that design system to make sure that it indeed is always up to date and that it is developed in a way that everyone can use it. So that's a little bit about the what. But then the question is, why do we want such a thing? And there's one very important property that I really have to note before getting into the why, and that is that a design system is alive. And what do I mean with saying that it is a living design system? Well, what that means is, and I already mentioned it a couple of times, but it's important that it's really imperative for you to know that that is the case. It is automatically in sync with the actual live implementation. So that means whenever something changes in the design system, that also means that the live production code is also updated. And this is a very important property because this helps us to make sure that the designers and the developers are always looking at the same version of the components, of the tokens, and of the guidelines. So why do we want this then? Well, I asked around a little bit, like for web developers, why did they want to have a design system? Because it's like a hype of the last years that everyone wants to have it. But the big question is why? And the answer I got from the designers at my company, but also from designers and developers elsewhere, is that by creating a very defined set of rules, we can actually focus on the things that matter, on the things that help us to create value to our customer. So we don't have to have a big conversation about whether we use 8 pixels or 9 pixels somewhere, whether this text should be bold or blue or whatever. Those basic rules are set, and based on that, we can move on to having valuable discussions, which really helps us. So that's the why. And I've tried in the last 6 months, ever since I started at Coolblue, to make this happen for native apps. And I thought of 3 ways in order to make this happen. And especially the living part is really hard for the design tokens and the components. Because as you can imagine, we need some way to make the implementation be completely in sync with the design. And that, for web, there's a lot of tooling around it. For web, there's a lot of ways to help us do it. But for native apps, that doesn't really exist. So I tried 3 things in the last 6 months, and not all of them are fully finished, but I did want to share the things I've been trying, and I really hope that you will be intrigued by this and maybe help me out to try and develop them further. So the first thing I've been trying to do is to share the design tokens across clients. The second is to create a component library with an accompanying demo app. And third of all, I tried to integrate the components from mobile with the website that already had the web components. So I'll get into the 3 of them in order. First of all, if we look back at the design tokens that we just talked about, it kind of looks like those could be the same for each client, right? A color red would be the same color red on web for Android and for iOS, right? Well, that's not fully the case. Actually, if you take a look, the color red might be the same, so it's the same color that's called, for example, subtle red, but the representation is different for the different clients. So for example, for web, we could use hue, saturation, and luminance. For Android, there might be a hex code. For iOS, you could use RGB. So there might be different representations of that same basic color. And that is the same way for the other design tokens as well. Even though the thing you're trying to describe is the same, the actual representation might be different. So how can we share those then? Well, what I was thinking about is we can have one origin, one way of describing them. We can choose any representation that we want, and from there convert them to the different versions of the different clients. And that original version can be in a code repository. So here it gets a little bit technical, but if that original version is in a code repository and we convert it to the different clients, we can distribute this converted value through our distribution channels for the different clients. So how would that workflow look? Well, we would have the original format again, the one that we decided to describe a color in. There will be some kind of converter, some way to convert this original representation to a representation that our client understands. And then we need some kind of setup to make sure that that changed value, that new representation, is indeed distributed to the actual code of the client. And there is actually already a GitHub repository that will help us with parts of this. So there's a library called Theo, and Theo gives us a lot of these converters for free. So it has some kind of format in which we can describe the original values, and it gives us like around 10 to 20 converters to convert to different formats. So we can describe our full set of design tokens using the format that Theo provides, and they can be automatically converted to Android, iOS, SCSS, whatever flavor of development you want. So the only thing you need to do yourself is implement this Theo, and then set up the stuff to make sure it is distributed throughout the right channels. And let's see how the workflow would look like. Let's assume Alice is a designer at our company. And Alice decides that the color subtle red is a little bit too subtle. So she changes it to a little bit more of a bold color. That means that Alice, as a designer, currently has to go to code and change the original format. Then she pushes this to a code repository, and from there on, our automatic setup will make sure that this new color is represented in both Android, iOS, and web. The only thing developers need to do is update their version of the design system, and all of a sudden they will have this new version, and all of them will be able to automatically use this new red color. So to summarize, we can share design tokens, and I've been setting this up. There's a sample repository on my GitHub account. So you can have the shared versions of these design tokens, define them once, and run them everywhere, basically. So the next thing I've been trying to do, now that we have these design tokens and they're shared between the developers, how about somehow sharing those components? Well, it would be awesome if we were able to just write component code once and run it everywhere, but I must be honest, it's not that easy. There are ways, there's React Native, there's Flutter in order to create cross-platform UI components, but that's not really what a lot of developers are currently doing. So I'm going to approach this from a native perspective, saying that I'm writing my code on a native platform. And in that case, it does mean that we still have to write our own implementation of those different components. So let's look at the button, the text input, and the toggle again. What happens on web is that we have one web page where we display this full list of components. So on the left, you see a full list of all the different components that are supplied by the design system. And on web, this is actually implemented as the code. So it uses the same code that is being used on the website as well. So let's take a look at how that would look for Android and iOS. Would we be able to create a similar web page, but in this situation, that would actually be an app? So using the same original code, we could display the different ways in which we can use components. And that same original code can be used throughout both the design system and the app. So there will be one definition, basically, and the implementation of both the design system and app will use that same original code. And when you're not a developer, you can think of this by thinking about a Google Drive document, for example. If you create a Google Drive document and you share it with a lot of your colleagues, you normally share the link. And if you change the contents of that Google Drive document, everyone that has the link will automatically get that updated version. And that's the same way that it works with code. And we call such a thing a library. So you create a directory where you implement a lot of those components, and both our normal design system app and our real production app can use that same original code. So whenever the origin changes, both of them will automatically update, which makes this a living design system, what we were aiming for. So how would that look with the workflow? Let's assume Alice, as a designer again, creates a new component. It's a toggle. We didn't have that before, so she designed it using Sketch, and she tells the developers, hey, I want to have this new component. Can you please build it for me? So in this case, 3 different developers have to implement it. One has to implement it for web, one has to implement it for Android, and one for iOS. And all of them create this original code and put it in their own library, so in their own shared directory. They commit this to a code repository, and from there on, it is distributed to the other developers. So now there's new code, and this code can be used by all the developers throughout the company, and all of them, whether they're building a product page or a search page, all of a sudden, all of them can use this same toggle. And when the implementation of the toggle changes, they only have to update the version number, and it will change as well. And this is something, it's not ideal, because we still have to build it 3 times, but it does really help by making things reusable, by creating more collaboration between different teams, between different domains of your company. So to summarize, we will have reusable elements. Those can be put in a separate library, and we can create a sort of a design system or demo app for the different clients, and then display a list of those components. So you will always know in an up-to-date way what the different components are that we support. And that is kind of cool, but it's not fully ideal, because we now have this Android app that will show us all the components that are available for Android. We have an iOS app that shows us all the components that are available for iPhones. And we have a web design system that will show us all the components that are available for web. Which means that if a designer wants to compare the 3, they have to have an Android phone, they have to have an iPhone, and they have to have a laptop. And they have to open, on the 3 screens at the same time, that button page, and that's going to be a lot of hassle, right? So wouldn't it be cool if somehow we were able to have those different implementations and put them all in one place? And I think a laptop would be the most logical place to put them. So we would combine all of them, and we are able to just compare them in one single glance. So a way I tried to do this in the past months is by creating some kind of toggle in the web page, where you toggle between the web implementation and screenshots for Android and iOS. So it's not possible to really run an Android app or an Android component in your browser, which means that at least we have to use screenshots or some other way to represent those different component implementations. But we have to be really sure that we are not creating manual screenshots, because that way we don't have a living design system anymore. We would have to go back and forth continuously every time we change a component, create new screenshots, and put them on the website. So we do really want this to be living again. We do want this to be completely in sync with our current code. And we can do that by using another open source library. For Android, this is called Screenshot Tests for Android. For iOS, I think it's similar, also an open source project. And this gives us an opportunity to write tests that actually make screenshots. And you can run those tests in a recording mode, saying you build something new and you want to record those new screenshots. But you can also run those tests in verify mode. And what this test will do is it will actually compare the existing screenshot to the new one that it's making, and the build will fail if those 2 don't match. And as you can see, it's just a couple of lines of code to make that happen. And this will give us a directory in our source control that will actually show the different screenshots of the different components. So how would that look in the workflow? Let's imagine we have an Android developer called Pablo, and Pablo just implemented that new toggle that we just discussed. So he wrote the code, and he wrote the tests that will make the screenshots. So what happens is, even when he's working on it, he will record the screenshots, and there will be a very nice screenshot of just that toggle. And now he sends his code to the version control, to GitHub, and of course that screenshot will be sent along. And in the build that's being run on GitHub, it verifies that indeed that screenshot is the one that was made. So it's a successful thing. I'm sorry. The screenshot will be sent to the laptop, to the design system, automatically updated, and it will be sent to JCenter to distribute it to the developers. And now imagine that Pablo, by accident, he was working on some other component, but by accident he changed the color of this toggle. And now he didn't record the tests again because he thought he was doing just fine and he didn't change that code. So GitHub is now running the verification again, but this time it notices the color of the toggle has changed. So it will fail the build. It will actually say, you know what, you changed your code and somehow the screenshot changed and I don't want that. So the build fails and Pablo has to investigate. And this also gives us, as you can see, a very good way to make sure that our designs don't change without us wanting them to. So what gives us the benefits of uploading our screenshots is that we can fully customize this solution. We can make it as complex as we want ourselves. And we do not have any dependencies on any other parties by creating this, except for the open source ones. But of course, we can always clone those. So are there also some things that are less ideal? Well, implementing this, I've been trying it, and it is kind of hard. It's kind of hard to make sure that those screenshots that you create are actually put in that design system. It's pretty complex to set up that whole screenshot testing on your continuous integration system. So it's not ideal. And also, you won't be able to test any interactions, and you won't be able to test any animations that happen, because we only have screenshots, right? So there's one way that I try to improve this a little bit, and that's by running an emulator in our browser. So next to having this toggle to toggle between Android, iOS, and web, we now actually also put a fake phone in our browser, an iPhone and an Android phone. And there are actually some companies that provide this. I found 2 on the internet currently, Appetize.io and Run That App. And both of those basically give you an opportunity to, with a couple of lines of code, integrate a emulator somewhere on the web page. And when you click it, your app is opened and you can run it and you can work with it. And that way we can easily integrate it, and we get the full experience. So we can run that full design system, even though our designer might not have the app installed, or they might not have an iPhone or an Android phone. But of course, you do have a third-party dependency, which is less than ideal. If they somehow stop working, well, your implementation will fail as well. And it's kind of expensive, it doesn't really scale that well. And of course, you don't directly get to compare the different components. You first have to start up the app and browse to the right page. So both of them are not fully ideal, but for now, it's the things I've been trying and the things that have worked for us. So to summarize, I think it would be good to have one place where we have the full design system with all 3 implementations. And we can do that by uploading screenshots, and we can do it by running the emulator in the browser, and even combine the 2. So to summarize, these are the 3 things that I've been trying in the last 6 months. And I'm really happy by now. I have a happy face, even more than I had before. These are the resources that I used during the talk. And I just wanted to let you know, really help me out. So please join the discussion at designsystems.slack.com. It's an open Slack channel, so invite yourself and join me at #topicmobile. Thank you very much. Are there any questions? We have one in the front.
Hi, thank you. What about different design guidelines? For example, Google has its material design buttons, toggles, I mean, and they are different from iOS. So is it possible to generate some distinct, different components?
Well, we have had this discussion in our company already quite a lot. And basically, you have to decide what you want to do, because material design is a design system in and of itself. iOS has its own guidelines, which actually also are a design system. So if your company also decides that they want to have their own design system, they have to basically decide for each component and also for the navigational patterns and everything. They have to decide if they want to use the ones from material design and from the iOS guidelines, or if they want to create brand consistency and use the same one for each. So we've been doing like a little bit of one, little bit of the other. So for example, for Coolblue, the buttons are consistent throughout the brand. So we do not use the ripple and we do not use iOS things for a button. But for example, for a checkbox, I think we use the system default. So, and by having one design system where we can compare them, you can actually describe, hey, you know what? For this component, we decided to use the material guideline, as you can see in the screenshots.
Got the point, thanks. And have you tried generating screenshots with Fastlane?
We haven't done Fastlane. We have tried it with the Firebase test lab, because they also provide it. But using this way was the easiest way to actually also be able to test whether they are correct, which is something that we thought was a very nice addition.
You've shown a test on Android. Do you have ones on iOS?
I currently don't, because I'm an Android developer, so the proof of concept that I've built is Android only, but I think it should look pretty much the same, because it's also from Facebook. It got ported, I think, by Uber, so they're now maintaining it. But I think it's going to be the same lines of code, basically.
Thanks. And the last question, whose responsibility, in your opinion, to manage this design ecosystem across platforms, design team, iOS team, Android team, and web team? Is this team lead's responsibility or the designer's side responsibility?
Well, there are full blogs written about that, which I've read up until now. What we do at Coolblue is we have a design system team with representatives of the different platforms. But it kind of depends on the size of your company. It depends on the stage that the design system is in. But normally what you see is that there is a design system group, so a group of people that are responsible for it. And those contain both designers, both developers from all the different disciplines. But that's when you have a big company, of course. If you have a very small one, it's mostly the person that cares the most. So.
And the very last question. How do you think, is it necessary to introduce such design system and automation into project where design is just evolving and changing every time? As the first option, and the second option is when the design is freezed and are not subjected to change in the near future.
Well, I think that second option doesn't, like, it rarely happens. Still, like, a very big companies, I mean, at our company, the designers have been working on the design for 20 years almost, but they still change it. They still develop, they still make it better. So I think a frozen design doesn't really exist. But for your first part of your question, you asked, like, hey, how do you do it when you have an evolving design, when it evolves a lot? I think in that case it actually will help to ask specifically to your UX designers to create the rules. So by asking them to create very limited sets of spacings and of colors and everything, you basically force them to think really well about the design that they're making. And of course, that's not in a 5-people startup. That's not going to work probably, but it will, even within a smaller company, it will help, I think.
I think Figma and several other design platforms and prototyping platforms, I suppose they are providing such exporting features. Am I right or not?
There are some, yeah. And at Coolblue, we're mostly using currently Sketch for the design. But I did hear, of course, also about InVision that has a design system, tooling, stuff like that. But the problem is that you have to, of course, convince designers then to move to a different platform. And the same goes for developers. We don't really like to be forced in a certain direction. So there might be some ways. I didn't hear about Figma being able to export this much. I know that from Sketch you can export to Zeppelin, for example, which is free for the developers to see. And then they, I think last week or something, they actually had an update where you can also upload components to Zeppelin, which gets a little bit in this way, but it's never live. Like, it's never completely in sync. You have to do a new export and then make sure that that's in your code base again.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Other questions? I have one in the back there and one in the back there. I don't know who's first.
Hi.
Yes, hi.
What is the team dimension, or how many people should be there in team to realize all the libraries that you want to upload and to see all on desktop? Does it justify all the work around it?
So you're asking me how many people or how big a team do you need to get this thing off the ground to make sure that everything is taken care of?
And to go that step further and make it
automated.
on desktop.
I think in order to create a component library, you only need one developer. It's basically when you start developing or when you already have a code base and you start to make things more reusable, it's pretty easy to just create a separate module. It doesn't even have to be a library that's distributed, because that's also a lot of setup. But just extracting those common components from your normal code base will help you to think about them and to make them more reusable. And from there, creating a sample app in the same project also isn't really a lot of work. So that's like the first step that you can do even when you only have 1 or 2 developers. Setting up the whole automation process, I think, makes sense when the company is that big that there's a lot of different teams that work on different features that are not talking every day. So you need those rules and you need that automation to make sure that the collaboration is still as efficient as it can be. So I think, we're currently, I think, 200 people in tech. So it's a pretty big company, you can say. But that's like all the way back end to front end. So we started this design system when we were just 2 developers. We're currently 5. It kind of depends, I think. And it also depends, you need to have people that actually like doing this. So you have to have people that like setting up those scripts and making sure that that distribution works. But you can normally find those developers. So, yeah, thank you. We have a question over here, I think.
I wanted to ask, do you create some rules for developers to not be able to introduce new design tokens directly in the main repository without going through the design system, and whether you have different rules for components and tokens?
That's a good question. So you're asking me if there's any rules currently in place to make sure that developers don't,
like linting rules.
that they don't accidentally add stuff. We want those, but since for Android we're currently 5 people in one team, so we talk daily. We really don't do that. We PR check everyone's code right now, so we have lint checks basically only for our code quality. But we do really want to get that going at some point as well. And for our front-end developers, I do think they have some rules in place. And every new front-end developer at our company first works 1 or 2 months within the design system team, so that they are really knowledgeable about what is a component, what is a design token, how does it work.
Thanks. I think those can be like reused between different companies, and it will be really interesting to join the conversation in that channel and to just share experience and maybe share even rules and like patterns.
That would be great. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
We have one more question in the front.
I've got a practical question about development side of this. When you generate, I suppose, code, representation of the button or any component or element, how does it integrate to project? Is it a Java class or some customization logic? How does this design code applies to real mobile application?
So you ask me, how do we implement a component, basically,
yes,
writing code?
Yes, how is it generated, integrated to project? Is a separate library of design components, or is it just Java class which is automatically linked to project?
There's a couple of steps that we use to make sure that we extract the component code from our normal code base. So like a first very simple step would be to at least create a button class or a toggle class, so that at least the code is in one place and you can reuse that wherever you're using a button. That would be step 1. And step 2 would be to put it in a separate, for Android, in a separate module. I don't know what it's called for iOS, but like within your big project, you just create a separate directory, basically, and you put all of those components in there. And you can also put the design tokens in there. And then the last step is to create a real library. So you have a separate project, and you use JCenter or CocoaPods to actually implement that in your normal development cycle.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any more questions? I don't think so. Then I want to really thank you for being here, and talk to me if you want to afterwards.